June 15, 2024. The St. Mary's Cathedral was filled with 200 guests waiting for what everyone believed would be the perfect wedding between David Chen and his fiancée Amanda. But as David's younger sister Lisa sat in the front pew, she had no idea that her brother was about to make a confession that would shatter not just his wedding day, but 8 years of family lies that had torn their family apart. Lisa Chen, 28, had been estranged from her brother David for nearly a decade. What had once been an unbreakable sibling bond had been destroyed by a single night in 2016, a night that ended with their parents dead in a car accident, and Lisa believing that David was responsible for the tragedy that orphaned them both. For 8 years, Lisa had lived with the crushing weight of losing her parents and her brother in one devastating blow. She had declined David's wedding invitation, refused his phone calls, and built a life that had no room for the man she held responsible for destroying their family. But 20 minutes before David was supposed to walk down the aisle, Lisa received a text message that would change everything. "Please come to the church. There's something about Mom and Dad's accident that you need to know. Something I should have told you 8 years ago. David." What Lisa didn't know was that David Chen had been carrying a secret so devastating that it had required him to accept blame for their parents' death rather than reveal the truth. A secret that had cost him his relationship with his only remaining family member, but had protected Lisa from a truth that could have destroyed her completely. But on his wedding day, surrounded by the love of the woman who had convinced him that secrets destroy more than they protect, David was finally ready to tell his sister the truth about the night their parents died, and why he had let her hate him for 8 years rather than tell her what really happened. David and Lisa Chen had been more than siblings. They had been best friends, partners in crime, and each other's greatest source of support throughout their childhood. Born just 3 years apart to loving Chinese-American parents in San Francisco, they had grown up in a household that celebrated both their cultural heritage and their American dreams. Their father, Dr. James Chen, was a respected cardiologist who had immigrated from Taiwan as a young man and built a successful medical practice through decades of hard work. Their mother, Susan Chen, was a high school principal who was beloved by students and faculty alike for her wisdom, compassion, and dedication to education. David, the older sibling, had always been the responsible one. The straight-A student who followed rules, excelled in everything he attempted, and seemed destined to follow in his father's footsteps as a doctor. Lisa was a creative rebel, artistic, spontaneous, and fiercely independent, with dreams of becoming a filmmaker that her parents supported even when they didn't fully understand. Despite their different personalities, David and Lisa were inseparable. David helped Lisa with math homework she struggled with, while Lisa taught David how to take risks and enjoy life beyond academics. They shared inside jokes, defended each other against playground bullies, and promised they would always be there for each other no matter what happened. With a Chen team, David would say whenever they faced challenges together, Chen siblings against the world. Lisa adored her big brother and felt completely safe knowing that David would always protect her. He walked her to school when she was nervous about starting kindergarten, taught her how to ride a bike when their parents were too busy with work, and was the first person she called when she got her heart broken by her first boyfriend. Their parents, James and Susan, were enormously proud of both their children. They created a loving home where education was valued, cultural traditions were honored, and both children felt supported in pursuing their individual dreams. Family dinners were sacred in the Chen household. Every evening at 6 o'clock, all 4 family members would gather around the dining room table to share food, stories about their days, and dreams for the future. These dinners were filled with laughter, debates about current events, and a kind of unconditional love that made both David and Lisa feel like they were the luckiest children in the world. But perfect families, as the Chens would learn in the most tragic way possible, can be destroyed in a single moment by circumstances beyond anyone's control. The Chen family's perfect life was about to be shattered by one night that would leave 2 siblings orphaned and believing that love could be destroyed by a single terrible mistake. But the truth about what really happened would be even more devastating than the tragedy itself. The night that changed everything was December 23rd, 2016. David was 24, home from medical school for Christmas break, and Lisa was 21, in her senior year of college studying film production. The family had spent the evening decorating their Christmas tree and making plans for their holiday celebrations. At 9:30 p.m., David received a call from his girlfriend, Sarah, who was stranded at the airport after her flight from New York was canceled due to a snowstorm. Sarah was supposed to spend Christmas with the Chen family for the first time, and she was devastated about missing the holiday she had been looking forward to for months. "I have to go pick up Sarah," David told his parents. "She's stuck at the airport, and there are no available taxis or ride shares because of the weather." James and Susan Chen exchanged glances. The weather had been deteriorating all evening, with heavy snow creating dangerous driving conditions throughout the Bay Area. The news was advising everyone to stay off the roads unless absolutely necessary. "Son, the roads are terrible tonight," Dr. Chen said with concern. "Maybe Sarah should just stay at an airport hotel and come in the morning when the weather clears." But David was determined to help the woman he loved. Sarah had been nervous about meeting his parents for the first time, and he couldn't bear the thought of her spending Christmas Eve alone in an airport hotel. "I'll be careful, Dad. I'm a good driver, and I know these roads. I'll pick her up and drive straight back home." Lisa offered to go with him. She loved Sarah and wanted to help welcome her to their family Christmas celebration. But David insisted on going alone, not wanting to put his sister at risk in the dangerous weather. "Stay here and help Mom finish wrapping presents," David told Lisa with a smile. "I'll be back in 2 hours with Sarah, and we can all have hot chocolate and watch Christmas movies together." Those were the last words David Chen ever spoke to his parents. At 11:47 p.m., Dr. James Chen and Susan Chen left their house to drive to the local 24-hour pharmacy. Susan had remembered that she needed to pick up prescription medication for her blood pressure, medication she had forgotten to get earlier in the week and would need for their Christmas Day celebrations. "We'll be right back, sweetheart," Susan told Lisa as they put on their coats. "David should be home with Sarah soon. Tell them we want to get Mom's medication, if they get back before we do." The pharmacy was only 10 minutes away from their house. It should have been a simple errand, a quick trip to pick up medication, and return home to wait for David and Sarah. But at 12:23 a.m., on the icy road to Highway 101, a drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into James and Susan Chen's car at 60 miles per hour. Both parents were killed instantly. The phone call that shattered Lisa's world came at 1:15 a.m., but the devastating news about her parents' death would be followed by a revelation about David's absence that would destroy their sibling bond forever. What Lisa didn't know was that David was already blaming himself for a tragedy he couldn't have prevented. Lisa was waiting in the living room when the phone rang at 1:15 a.m. She expected it to be David calling to say he and Sarah were on their way home from the airport. Instead, it was a police officer with news that would change her life forever. "Miss Chen, I'm Officer Rodriguez with the California Highway Patrol. I'm calling about your parents, Dr. James Chen and Susan Chen. There's been an accident." The words that followed were a blur of medical terminology and legal procedures, but the meaning was clear. Her parents were dead, killed by a drunk driver while running a simple errand to the pharmacy. Lisa collapsed on the living room floor, surrounded by half-wrapped Christmas presents and the remnants of what had been a perfect family evening just hours before. In one phone call, she had become an orphan, alone in a house where she had grown up feeling completely loved and protected. When David finally arrived home at 2:30 a.m. with Sarah, he found Lisa sitting in the dark living room, still in shock from the news that their parents would never come home. "Where were you?" Lisa asked through tears. "Where were you when Mom and Dad died?" David's face went white as Lisa explained about the accident, about the drunk driver, about how their parents had died alone on a highway while their children were elsewhere. But what devastated Lisa most was realizing that if David had been home instead of at the airport, their parents never would have left the house. "They went to get Mom's prescription," Lisa said, her voice breaking. "They only left because they thought you'd be home soon with Sarah. If you had been here, they would have asked you to go to the pharmacy instead. They would still be alive if you hadn't left." The words hit David like physical blows, but he couldn't deny the logic. If he had been home, their parents would never have ventured out into the dangerous weather. His decision to pick up Sarah had created the circumstances that led to their parents' death. "Lisa, I'm so sorry," David said, tears streaming down his face. "You're right. This is my fault. I should have been here. I should have protected them." In her grief and shock, Lisa's words became cruel. You chose your girlfriend over your family. You left them alone, and now they're dead because of your choice. Sarah, devastated by the tragedy and her role in it, quietly left the Chen house that night and never returned. David had lost his parents and his girlfriend in one terrible evening, but the worst loss was still to come. Lisa's grief transformed into 8 years of hatred toward the brother she had once adored. But what she didn't know was that David was hiding an even more devastating truth about that night, a truth so painful that he chose to accept blame rather than destroy his sister's memory of their parents forever. The weeks following the funeral were the darkest of Lisa's life, but they were made worse by her growing resentment toward David. Every time she looked at her brother, she saw the reason their parents were dead. Every conversation felt poisoned by the knowledge that his choice had orphaned them both. David tried repeatedly to bridge the gap between them. He handled all the funeral arrangements, managed their parents' estate, and tried to create space for both of them to grieve together. But Lisa couldn't get past the belief that their parents would still be alive if David had made different choices that night. "I can't look at you without seeing their empty chairs at the dinner table," Lisa told David during one of their final conversations. "Every time you speak, all I hear is the choice you made to put Sarah before our family." The breaking point came 6 months after the accident, when David suggested they sell their parents' house and move to a smaller place together where they could support each other through their grief. "I don't want to live with the person responsible for killing our parents," Lisa said with finality. "I don't want you in my life anymore, David. I can't heal from this tragedy while being reminded every day of why it happened." David's heart shattered, but he understood Lisa's need to blame someone for their devastating loss. He moved out of their childhood home, leaving Lisa to live alone in the house where they had once been a happy family of 4. For 8 years, the Chen siblings lived as strangers. Lisa threw herself into her filmmaking career, channeling her grief into documentary projects about loss and family trauma. David finished medical school and became a pediatric surgeon, dedicating his life to saving children's lives as a way of atoning for his perceived role in their parents' death. They lived in the same city, but never spoke. Lisa declined invitations to David's graduation from medical school, avoided restaurants and events where she might encounter him, and built a life that had no room for the brother she had once considered her best friend. David respected Lisa's boundaries, but never stopped loving her or hoping that someday they could heal their relationship. He sent birthday cards that went unacknowledged, left voicemails that were never returned, and carried the weight of losing his entire family because of one night when everything went wrong. But David was also carrying a secret that made the situation infinitely more complex than Lisa understood. David had discovered something about their parents' death that would have destroyed Lisa's faith in everything she believed about their family. So for 8 years, he carried this burden alone, accepting hatred from his sister rather than revealing a truth that would have hurt her even more than their parents' death. 3 months after the funeral, while going through their parents' personal effects, David had found something that shattered his understanding of the night his parents died. Hidden in his father's desk drawer were credit card statements showing charges at a downtown hotel. Charges that occurred on nights when Dr. James Chen had told his family he was working late at the hospital. Further investigation revealed hotel receipts, restaurant bills for 2 people, and eventually love letters addressed to Dr. James Chen from a woman named Catherine Walsh, a nurse at the hospital where he worked. Dr. James Chen, the devoted husband and father that David and Lisa had worshipped, had been having an affair for over 2 years before his death. But the discovery that devastated David most was finding text messages on his father's phone from the night of the accident. The messages revealed that James and Susan Chen hadn't left the house to get Susan's prescription medication. They had left to drive to Catherine Walsh's apartment because she had threatened to tell Susan about the affair if James didn't end his marriage immediately. The emergency that had taken their parents out into the dangerous weather wasn't forgotten prescription. It was James Chen trying to convince his mistress not to destroy his family by revealing his infidelity. David realized that his parents had died because of his father's affair, not because of his decision to pick up Sarah from the airport. If he had been home that night, their parents still would have left to deal with Catherine Walsh's ultimatum. His presence wouldn't have prevented the tragedy. But telling Lisa this truth would have accomplished nothing except destroying her beautiful memories of their father and devastating her faith in the love story she believed their parents had shared. David made the conscious choice to let Lisa blame him rather than learn that their father had been betraying their family for years before his death. For 8 years, David carried this terrible knowledge alone. He allowed Lisa to hate him for a choice that hadn't actually caused their parents' death, rather than reveal that their beloved father had been living a double life that made their perfect family an illusion. David's wedding day would force him to finally choose between protecting Lisa from the truth and rebuilding the relationship that had once meant everything to both of them. But the revelation he was about to make would either heal their family or destroy Lisa's ability to trust anyone ever again. David met Amanda Rodriguez 2 years earlier at the hospital where they both worked. She was a child psychologist. He was a pediatric surgeon, and they bonded over their shared dedication to helping children heal from trauma. Amanda was the first person David had ever told about the affair, about the real reason his parents died, and about his decision to let Lisa hate him rather than learn the truth. "You can't marry me while carrying this secret," Amanda told David as they planned their wedding. "And you can't build a life with me while your sister believes you're responsible for your parents' death. Secrets destroy families, David. I've seen it happen too many times in my work with children from broken homes." Amanda insisted that healing could only happen through truth, no matter how painful. She convinced David that Lisa deserved to make her own choices about how to handle the knowledge about their father's affair, rather than having David make that choice for her. "Your sister is stronger than you think," Amanda argued, "and she's been living with the wrong kind of pain for 8 years. Don't you think she deserves to know the truth so she can begin healing from the right kind of grief?" The week before their wedding, David made a decision that would change everything. He wrote Lisa a letter explaining everything. The affair, the text messages, the real reason their parents had left the house that night. But he couldn't bring himself to send it. Instead, on the morning of his wedding, David sent a text message that brought Lisa to church where they would finally face 8 years of misunderstood grief together. Lisa arrived at St. Mary's Cathedral 20 minutes before David's ceremony was scheduled to begin. She hadn't seen her brother in 3 years, hadn't spoken to him in longer than that, and had no idea what truth he could possibly reveal that would justify 8 years of silence. David was waiting in the church vestry, wearing his wedding tuxedo, but looking like a man about to face execution rather than marriage. When Lisa walked in, both siblings froze, overwhelmed by the familiarity of seeing each other after years of deliberate separation. "Thank you for coming," David said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would." Lisa's anger was immediate and intense. "I'm here because you said there was something about Mom and Dad's accident that I needed to know. But there's nothing you can tell me that changes the fact that you weren't home when they needed you." David pulled out his phone and showed Lisa the text messages he had found on their father's phone, messages that revealed the affair and the real reason their parents had left the house that night. Lisa read the messages 3 times, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and devastation as she realized what they meant. Dad was having an affair? For over 2 years, David confirmed, with Catherine Walsh, a nurse at the hospital. The night they died, she was threatening to tell Mom about the relationship unless Dad left our family. They didn't go to the pharmacy. Lisa, they went to Catherine's apartment to try to convince her not to destroy our family. Lisa sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the revelation that their perfect father had been betraying their family for years before his death. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. 8 years, David. I've hated you for 8 years because I thought you were responsible for their death. Because I didn't want you to lose your faith in Dad on top of losing him forever, David replied. I didn't want you to question everything you believed about our family. I thought it was better for you to blame me, someone who was still alive and could eventually earn forgiveness, than to blame Dad for something you could never confront him about. Lisa was crying now, 8 years of misplaced anger and grief pouring out of her as she realized how wrong she'd been about everything. I've wasted 8 years hating the wrong person, she said through tears. I've been punishing you for Dad's mistakes. I've been living with the wrong kind of pain this entire time. David knelt beside his sister's chair. Lisa, you weren't wrong to be angry. You weren't wrong to need someone to blame. I couldn't let you blame Dad when he couldn't defend himself or explain his choices. But you let me blame you instead. You let me hate you to protect my memory of him. You were the only family I had left, David said simply. I couldn't bear the thought of you losing faith in the father you adored, even if it meant losing you because of it. Lisa looked at her brother, really looked at him, for the first time in 8 years. She saw the weight he had been carrying, the sacrifice he had made to preserve her childhood memories, the love that had motivated his decision to accept blame for something he hadn't caused. "David, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for hating you, for blaming you, for wasting 8 years that we could have spent grieving together and supporting each other." "You have nothing to apologize for," David replied. "You were dealing with the worst loss imaginable in the only way you could. I hope we can find a way to move forward together now." Lisa stood up and embraced her brother for the first time since their parents' funeral. "We're still the Chen team," she whispered. "Chen's siblings against the world, right?" 30 minutes later, Lisa walked her brother down the aisle to marry Amanda Rodriguez. In her wedding toast, she thanked Amanda for convincing David that secrets hurt more than truth, and for giving the Chen siblings a chance to rebuild their relationship on a foundation of honesty rather than protective lies. The wedding reception became an impromptu reunion for David and Lisa, who spent the evening sharing stories about their parents that honored both the love they had shared and the complicated humanity that made their father's mistakes understandable, if not forgivable. 6 months after the wedding, Lisa moved back to San Francisco to be closer to David and Amanda. She began therapy to process 8 years of misplaced grief and anger, while David started his own counseling to heal from the guilt and isolation he had carried alone for so long. The Chen siblings learned that love sometimes requires forgiveness for the lies we tell to protect each other, and that healing is possible even when the truth comes years too late. They also learned that the strongest families are not those without secrets, but those with the courage to face the truth together when the time is finally right.